Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for attending this webinar titled The Green Road to Net Zero. This is Hamidreza. I am Professor of Low Carbon and Renewable Energy Systems, and I have over 20 years of experience in industry as well as academia. I have worked in industry as a technical manager and industry consultant in low carbon and renewable energy systems, as well as oil and gas and HVAC industries. And I've completed actually my PhD at Manchester University in 2010, then joined Cranfield University for 6 years, and now I'm working at Staffordshire University as a responsible person on MSc courses for mechanical engineering and sustainable energy technologies. And I also have several, I've been working on several funded projects in the field of carbon capture and storage and biogas, biofuel, and renewable energy systems. And here is with me my colleague Phil. Phil, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, Hamidreza. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name's Phil. I work in the Employer Partnerships team at the university as an Innovation Development Manager. I work basically working with businesses in the local and wider area to help them identify ways they can work with the university. So I'll allow Hamidreza to go through this brilliant topic he's going to be discussing, and then I'll just give you a little bit of an overview of the type of support you can get from a university and how you can actually access that. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Phil. If you have any question, please feel free to type your question in the chat section. We're going to come back to questions at the end. Of course, the subject is really demanding, and the products and information about net zero is progressively adding every day. And it's really complicated sometimes to figure out the actual map to achieving net zero. But in general, I hope today's presentation is quite informative enough to help us to plan our way forward for net zero by 2050. Before I start the actual presentation, I wanted to give you a flavor of my research work. I'm mainly focused on carbon capture and storage technologies. My research particularly is focused on oxy-turbine and CCS, working on new methods of capturing CO2 from gas-fired power plants. I also work on micro combined heat and power systems, cogeneration or trigeneration of heat, power, and cooling is one of the technologies and one of the ways forward to improve efficiency of energy systems. We'll see during the presentation how important energy efficiency improvement is. And I also work on some other types of renewables, including wind and geothermal and solar. And in terms of energy storage, I also work on mechanical energy storage, particularly compressed and liquid air. Our work at Staffordshire University includes engineering design, CFD modeling, process simulation, performance simulation, as well as fabrication and test. In particular, recently we've had an Innovate UK project to convert a micro gas turbine from diesel fuel to biogas fuel, which has been successfully, the system being designed, the combustor is being designed, fabricated and tested, and it's now actually in the phase of selling the product. All right. The headline of the talk, I'm having two monitors, so bear with me to make sure I'm synchronizing these two very well. So, are we responsible about global warming? That's the first question to answer. And definitely, if we are responsible, we need to act accordingly. And Paris Agreement was actually a conclusive effort of all nations to tackle the issue of global warming. So I'm going to give you a picture of UN environmental emission gap reports and the recent reports published by International Energy Agency on Global Energy Review 2021. And in particular, we're going to be focused on carbon dioxide emission, sustainable development scenarios, and how to react actually to achieve, react towards the aim and objectives of net zero in heavy industries, by using renewable energy systems, by using carbon capture, storage, and utilization, and looking into green buildings and electrical vehicles. And at the end, I want to have a few snapshots on the UK 10-point plan for green industrial revolution and how we are coping with that plan to achieve net zero. Carbon dioxide level has increased from 200 ppm to over 400 ppm during recent years. And when considered the different reasons and possible causes of carbon dioxide emissions and increase in globe, in particular, our activities are the main source of that jump from 200 ppm to 400 ppm. Of course, there are some natural causes like volcanic eruptions, like solar fluctuations, pollution particles, and land and tree uses, changes in available amount of land and trees. But increase in greenhouse gas emission attributed to human activities seems to be the only one which nature cannot deal with it. So we can see that jump in level of emission since 19th century or after Industrial Revolution until now. Consequences are really complicated and difficult to deal with, from rising of seawater levels to longer and harder droughts across the world, destruction of ozone layer, heat waves, and of course what we see nowadays, strong hurricanes, storms, snowfalls, hailstorms, and sandstorms all around the world. So clearly we see effect of that emission increase in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases globally. Is that only a problem for polar bears? When we talk about global warming, normally images like what you see at the middle is what makes us to think this is a time to act. But the picture presented in Guardian in 2019 shows polar bears are approaching cities in North Russia actually for food. And that means it's not climate change. We need to think about climate emergency and crisis or breakdowns. That's great. Nations came together. They decided in November 2016 to help each other and help the planet to survive. And since then, the efforts and plans are being published and several fundings are being allocated, although still a long way to go to make sure the temperature of globe is not going to rise more than 2 degrees by 2050, And of course, we need to aim for less than that level, hopefully approaching 1.5 degree maximum. This is a very good slide actually from the report published by IEA straight away after the Paris Agreement, and showed us how different technologies can play their own role to tackle the issue of climate change. And this graph shows if we want to stick to 2-degree scenario, renewables, they do have 32% of the global carbon emission reduction, avoidance, or capture by 2050, followed by CCS, carbon capture and storage, 12%. And that 12% is a huge amount of carbon emission. That's around 94 gigatons of carbon dioxide that has to be captured by 2050 using carbon capture. Or in addition, negative emission, which means burning biofuels as a renewable source of fuel, and on the other side, capturing CO2. That's going to have a share of 14 gigatons by 2050. That's called bioenergy with CCS or BECCS. It's really interesting to see end-use efficiency has got a big share of 38%, which has been increased to 40%, and fuel switching nowadays is quite important. So using alternative fuels, including biofuels and hydrogen, are progressively advertised and promoted to be able to tackle the issue of global warming and carbon dioxide emission. This is a more recent report from IEA. As you can see, efficiency will have a share of 40%, followed by renewables. Now they have a share of 35% of the total target by 2060. And CCS will have a share of 14%. This followed by nuclear 6% and fuel switching 5%. So all the technologies which has to technologies will have to come together to help us to achieve net zero are going to be a branch of either of these main solutions or main technologies that have the contribution towards that net zero. UN Environmental Emission Gap Report shows that energy-related activities are the main source of global greenhouse gas emission. This is a good graph showing energy, how energy has got a share in greenhouse gas emission depending by the sector. So energy use in industry has got a share of 24%. Transportation has a share of about 16%, followed by energy use in buildings, 16%, about 16–70%. And it goes to other sources of energy use. And in all cases, energy is the main factor in terms of emitting carbon dioxide emission based on this UN Environmental Emission Gap Report. So for that reason, Global Energy Review 2021 from International Energy Agency has been published. Quite informative reports prepared by IEA. There are several general facts. First of all, global carbon emission are set to jump 1.5 billion tons this year after the economic recovery from the COVID crisis. So we've had a little bit of a drop in 2019 and 2020, but again in 2021 we see that although COVID crises are still ongoing, but energy industry is going to recover and emission is something which we have to be aware of and act upon. So in terms of global energy-related carbon dioxide emission, are heading for the second largest annual increase ever in 2021. There are coal demand actually exceeding the level of 2019. Also, in some countries, European countries, the coal mining and the coal burning is decreased tremendously. But in some countries like China, we see, and US, we see coal still having a major share in the portfolio of energy generation. Natural gas, of course, as a cleaner fuel compared to coal, has a very high share of energy generation, but technologies are there, and if investment are available, carbon capture from gas-fired power plants are possible, even from the industrial processes burning natural gas. Technologies are available, and it's a matter of investment to be able to capture CO2 from these areas. On the other side, actually, renewables remains actually the success story after COVID-19 crisis. China is going to have almost half of the global increase in renewable energy generation after the COVID era. This is a picture perhaps showing some numbers in terms of level of emission. As you can see here, 2021, 32 gigatons of carbon dioxide is expected to be emitted in industry. We've had a decline of 1.5 gigatons in 2020, which might be due to COVID situation. But as I said, energy industry is gaining momentum again, and we have to be careful about emission in 2021 and forward. We'll see even in UK live global live emission of carbon dioxide. I show you a slide how the situation slightly is increasing in terms of carbon emission. All right, what do we need to do? We have to have sustainable development scenarios developed. Of course, there are sustainable development goals, SDGs, and based on those, we need different scenarios to be able to tackle global warming, to tackle emission of carbon dioxide, and to maintain actually the temperature of globe increase around 1.5, 1.6. In fact, 2 degrees C temperature is the highest we can imagine. We shouldn't be kind of comforting ourselves with 2 degrees C scenario. And of course, 1.5 degrees C scenario above pre-industrial temperature level requires a lot of attention and different, as I said, scenarios to act upon and basically invest enough to be able to capture enough CO2, remove enough carbon dioxide, and avoid enough CO2 to be able to make sure we're achieving the targets of net zero. This is a good picture. There is a link here. We can change actually and compare sustainable development scenario goals separately. If we change temperature here, when going to the link, you see the graph is going to move, the blue graph, and shows how change of that temperature increase is going to affect the level of emission. Excuse Give me a second. So what is clear, the world is not on track to meet energy-related components based on sustainable development goals. For that reason, we have to have different actions done, and these actions are somehow summarized in the few next slides, which I'm going to present. First of all, we have to think about improving the share of renewables. As you have seen from IEA report, a share of up to 35% is allocated to renewables. In general, renewables are having a good improvement. They do have a good generation increase year by year, and this is really promising. If you look at the diagram showed on left-hand corner of the slide, China has got a huge amount of increase in wind, also solar energy. United States likewise having a good share of wind. EU, you can see the share of solar, wind, bioenergy, and hydro. So as you can see, solar PV and wind are set to continue contribute 2/3 of the renewable growth by 2020 and 2021. This picture, left-hand side, is actually renewable energy generation increased by technology, country, and region, and right-hand side shows only based on the technology. So you can see wind has got the maximum growth in terms of renewable energy share in 2020 and 2021. Industries, I think industries are one of the major sources of global greenhouse gas emission, which has been receiving the minimum attention. We have been focused on power stations and power industry, but industry processes, including steel, cement industry, glass industry, all they do have a huge amount of emission, and they need our attention, particularly the burning mainly fossil fuels, because they need actually high temperatures. For instance, in a steam cracker, 1000 degrees C. In a blast furnace, we need 1500 degrees C. So high temperature requirements of heavy industry, that's one fact from the main challenges we are facing in terms of achieving net zero emission in heavy industries. They do have, these industries, normally they have long-lived capital assets. So they are built typically to work for 30, 40 years. It's not easy to retire them early and switch to alternative technologies, because this is really costly. There are processes, they do have emissions, and these processes involving different raw materials, and they involve processes that have limited market applicability. So for that reason, again, heavy industries are having actually a big challenge to achieve net zero target. And in terms of trade considerations, these industries like steel, aluminium, primary chemicals, they have actually limited profit margin, and they have a large upfront investment. So it's highly competitive market, and it's really difficult to basically stop these industries or ask them to install very expensive equipment, although we don't have any choice but to support these industries and help them out. You see actually in terms of energy demand in selected heavy industries, mainly they're burning coal. As you can see, oil in chemical industries is quite large amount of fuel comes from oil. coal in steel industry still has got a big share, or in cement industry. And we don't say not to burn coal. Of course, there are post-combustion capture technologies, pre-combustion capture technologies, and oxy-fuel combustion, and even membrane technologies nowadays. But to address the issue and find a way to actually make sure that emission is being controlled and not emitted if possible. In terms of efficiency improvement, which is another aspect of net zero, as we've seen, 40% of the share goes to energy improvement. New technologies has to kick in. For instance, we do need actually to think about green buildings, which they can survive by themselves. They have their own means of heat and power generation, which are mainly renewables or low carbon technologies. We have to think about integration of cogeneration technologies, because combined efficiency of cogeneration technology is normally higher than when we generate electricity in a centralized manner. In terms of material efficiencies, in terms of improving efficiency of furnaces, steam turbines, gas turbines, and bringing new technologies, these are all important aspects to be able to cover that 40% emission reduction using efficiency improvement. In fact, a good sentence is energy efficiency is the first fuel for achieving high ambition climate goals. Another aspects of net zero emission are green building envelopes. Unfortunately, still in 2019, 2/3 of the countries, they are lacking mandatory building codes, energy codes. So that means more than 5 billion square meters were built last year without mandatory performance requirements. That means actually a red flag that shows from the building industry, we have a lot of work to do. Energy intensity reduction in buildings is quite important. Insulations, using renewable sources, capturing CO2 from small scale, let's say boilers and heating or cooling systems, that's quite important. If you look at the picture, for instance, in 2019, building without having the code or energy code is quite huge, as you can see, and then followed by building having those mandatory codes, and very little number of net zero energy, net zero emission buildings actually. That has to improve. As you can see the picture in 2025, it's a more balanced picture, and when we go to 2030, is expected to see majority of the buildings having mandatory building energy codes, and almost half of the buildings are net zero emission. 2020, it seems to be decade of electric drive. We have had announcement from governments to stop actually building new diesel and petrol engine cars. So the global electrical vehicle outlook is been published, and it seems actually the electrical vehicle stock has been boosted to 7.2 million electric cars now in 2019, which is quite impressive. but this is going to increase as we speak, and we're expecting to see more actually battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electrical vehicles in 2021 and forwards. This means, again, another key milestone and another important pillar towards having net zero emission. I have spoken about the carbon capture, utilization, and storage. This is basically a key milestone and a key pillar for the net zero targets. It's literally impossible to achieve that target without storing carbon dioxide in underground reservoirs, which might also help in recovery of oil and gas. But the point is, there are carbon capture technologies out there. There has been good fundings to support the research. Now it's time actually for government and for private investors to act and help industries and help energy industry to install carbon capture technology plants, carbon capture plants, as well as to make sure there are means of transportation and storage available. The picture shows actually transition of carbon, how important CCUS is to transit to net zero. This is a picture showing actually the target by 2070. Of course, the target of 2050 is for some countries advanced in low carbon and renewable energy systems, but globally it's expected by 2070 in worldwide to see net zero is happening. As you can see here, the technologies are avoided demand, has got a good share, hydrogen, very important fuel of now and future. Bioenergy has got a good share in that carbon reduction. In terms of other renewables in this picture, a good share of possibly solar, wind, geothermal, electrifications, and technology performances, which is efficiency improvement. And you can see that purple one at the end is the important share which CCUS will have in terms of net zero. So this picture gives another aspects of net zero by 2070 in this scenario published by IEA. By 2020, net carbon dioxide emission is expected to be about 34 gigatons, but that net emission should drop to 27 by 2030, drop to 9.4 gigatons by 2050, and achieving net zero by 2070, according to this report published by International Energy Association. Do we have enough means of energy storage? Yes, there are now actually maybe focus of research in CCS being tailored towards storage side. There are some publications available that shows the world capacity to store carbon dioxide is quite acceptable, and definitely we need that storage level actually to be able to achieve net zero targets. What is important, of course, some part of this carbon dioxide is going to be utilized, is going to be used in industries, but majority has to go to a storage site. But it does have another benefit, as I mentioned, in enhanced oil recovery and enhanced gas recovery. There is a good report also from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which these reports actually include 5 different chapters. The first chapter is talking about understanding impacts of 1.5 degrees C global warming above the pre-industrial level. Chapter 2 is outlining actually the scenarios and pathways to achieve the goals and targets of IPCC. I'm going to show actually a table in next slide from that chapter. So these scenarios are not unique. Countries and in smaller scales, industries, they need to have their own net zero strategy plan, but they have to synchronize with each other and sing together to be able to achieve net zero target globally. Chapter 3 of the report is talking about impacts and risks, and chapter 4 about global response, which is essential and necessary to achieve the IPCC 1.5 degrees C scenario. And chapter 5 is talking about sustainability and equity, about interactions of climate change and climate response. This is one of the tables presented actually in chapter 2 of mitigation pathway towards 1.5 degree scenario. And as you can see, there are number of scenarios. We cannot say there is just one way to achieve net zero. And maybe what we can take away from this webinar is what are the main technologies, major technologies to achieve that net zero, but to detail those technologies and find solutions depending to industry, depending to countries. There has to be different scenarios, which of course they need to, as I said, be synchronized with the global scenario, country-wise, perhaps continent-wise, and global-wise. So you see different number of scenarios is being presented in this report. There is actually efforts in terms of net zero plan publications. I was following different institutions to see how they are presenting their scenarios in terms of net zero. IEA had a plan actually to release the IEA net zero report. In fact, the report it seems been released a couple of days ago. I have made a summary of the report here, but if you can gain access to IEA report for net zero plan, that would be really a bonus to plan your specific scenario and a strategy in your own company or basically in the country. So as you can see, carbon capture and storage, bioenergy, energy efficiency, hydrogen, electricity generation, and use of fossil fuels are different subsections of this report. I want to just quickly mention about 10-point plan for green industrial revolution in the UK. UK government just published a report in November 2020 outlining actually the level of investments they're planning to have for green industrial revolution. As you can see here, offshore wind, low carbon hydrogen, nuclear power, zero emission vehicles, green public transport, aviation, jet zero, and green ships, green buildings, carbon capture and storage, and protecting the natural environment. They do have their own shares highlighted in right-hand side. Each technology, each basically points has got a level of funding available to it and a level of carbon saving. For instance, wind is expected to save 25 megatons of carbon emission by 2032. Hydrogen, for instance, 41 megatons. It's twice more than wind, and that's because of the UK strategy to decarbonize natural gas and decarbonize buildings. And other technologies. I'm sure you have access to this report. This is just a screenshot I just captured a couple of hours ago from UK Electricity Live. A couple of hours ago at 11:45, wind was generating about 30% of energy, solar about 5%, gas normally is about 35 to 40%. Biomass has got a good share in Drax power station. In UK, we have one of the biggest biomass power stations in Europe. But still, you can see the level of the previous target, which was based on 80% reduction, was to achieve 100 grams of carbon dioxide emission per kilowatt hour. And this is just yearly emission. We see a increase last 12 months in carbon dioxide emission, maybe because of increasing demand, but that's something we need to address. The report, the page is quite interesting to kind of follow and see what is happening in, for instance, British Electricity Live in terms of different aspects of generating power. We're hoping to achieve zero emission by 2050 in some industries by 2030. Low carbon, offshore wind. I did mention about offshore wind and how important offshore wind is. For instance, Scottish Power has decided to switch fully to renewable wind energy and sell all the fossil fuel power stations. And UK government is going to invest about £160 million in addition to about £20 billion of investment for improvement of offshore wind energy. Low carbon and hydrogen is quite important. Hydrogen is not just the fuel of future, but it's fuel of present. At Staffordshire University, we particularly has focused our attention into hydrogen combustion, and there are publications that we have recently published in terms of design of a small-scale hydrogen combustors for micro gas turbine systems, and hopefully in future for boilers and burners and so on. It was followed by successful experience we had in terms of burning biogas in micro gas turbine systems. This is a very good graph I found from Siemens. We have two forms of hydrogen, blue hydrogen and green hydrogen. Blue hydrogen comes from steam methane reforming, and green hydrogen normally from separation of hydrogen and oxygen from water, and hopefully from renewable fuel, renewable electricity sources. And this picture shows how different industries they can act in terms of hydrogen generation and hydrogen consumption. And finally, all these technologies we discussed, they need to come together, sit together, and join in a network of smart network in smart cities. So if we have wind farm, if we have solar farms, if we have power stations with captures, if we have micro CHPs and geothermal energies, all of these technologies, they need to be able to synchronize. We still have challenges in terms of synchronizing electricity generated by renewables with the electricity generated by fossil fuels. And there are good investments and researches ongoing actually to tackle the issue. In some countries, a smart grid is still a challenge. Without that, possibly not, it's not possible to have smart cities and net zero emission buildings. To summarize, watching the time evolution of carbon emission leaves no doubt that we are cause of climate change. We are responsible for 3/4 of the global emission. The world is not on track to meet the energy-related, actually based on requirements based on sustainable development goals, but there are a very good movements ongoing in some countries, and of course this is a global effort. Wealthy countries and rich countries, they need to help others to be able to achieve goals and targets. Energy efficiency, quite important factor. So steel technologies, which they are carbon intensive, they have to be able to achieve higher efficiency levels. Renewables, they do have a good share, improving the efficiency of renewables, switching to less harmful renewables. For instance, organic photovoltaic instead of silicon photovoltaic, and that sort of improvement in terms of making hybrid systems, which is combination of renewable and fossil fuel systems with capture, is quite important. Electrical vehicles, green buildings, and hydrogen and alternative fuels, they have their own share of net zero target scenarios. We shouldn't forget about important pillar of CCUS, carbon capture and storage. We cannot achieve the target without that. And I have just outlined the UK government's priorities for 2050 net zero emission target, which was then that 10 points published in November last year. And importance of integrating low carbon and renewable energy systems to smart cities and smart buildings. Different references which I've used. As I said, this is an evolving subject. And of course, every day we have new reports and we need to adjust ourselves with the goals and targets and technologies. If you have any question, I'm sure, please drop your questions in the chat box. And I asked my colleague Phil to explain the couple of slides about the activities Innovation Enterprise Zone is doing, and then I'm happy to answer your questions. Phil, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hamidreza. Yeah, so obviously, as I said to you at the very start of this, ladies and gentlemen, I work in the employer partnerships team, and I can help basically ensure you access all the support that the university's got available. So we've got funding support at the moment for prototyping and new product development for businesses, and there's also funding support in innovations within transport, logistics, and mobility. So if you've got any of them areas which you're looking at developing a new product or a new process, definitely get in touch with us and we can have a conversation to sort of see if there's something which could be suitable for you and your business. We've also got office space available within the incubation and startup hatchery, which is very well priced in a really good location and can give you that opportunity to access more support from the university from being situated in the office space. You get access to all the specialist equipment. The equipment that we've got within the University Innovation Enterprise Zone is absolutely fantastic and has been a real plus point for all employers since it has opened. We're also developing our skills and knowledge development. So our apprenticeship offering has been running for the past sort of 4 or 5 years very successfully, and we're now developing a CPD program where people can go on more short-based courses. So once that's up and running, it's going to be a really good sort of offering for employers to offer them sort of training options, which the staff really do value, and the courses on the CPD programme could potentially lead into credits for the apprenticeships as well. So it could be a good way of dipping your toe into the water before starting an apprenticeship. So really good opportunities for your staff to learn within the workplace. We also can access support in terms of hiring student and graduate talent through our Unitemps in-house recruitment agency. And the above, a lot of the above funding support which I mentioned is specifically for SMEs. But if you are a large employer, we've still got innovation support which we can help you with. We can help you with Innovate UK bids, KTP applications, etc. So there's some really good opportunities for business to engage with the university and start looking at your innovation processes. Next slide, please. Just one more thing, folks. Oh yeah, there we are. There it is. So final slide for me. If you are interested, employers@staffs.ac.uk. You can request the Innovation Enterprise Zone brochure, or you can book a chat in with myself where we can perhaps book a Teams call or a Zoom call and then go through the options which we've spoken about and go through the brochure in much more detail. So it's employers@staffs.ac.uk, and we'll be happy to have a conversation with you to talk about the options. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. I'm happy to receive questions, if any. Okay. Thank you, Anna. So if there is no question, yeah, we need to wrap up the session then. Yes, all right. So if there is any question, I'll be happy to receive your questions. And if you want to have more discussions, I'll be more than happy to have online meetings together. If you're happy, or if you have any idea, project idea in terms of tackling the carbon dioxide emission and greenhouse gas emission, we'll be happy at Staffordshire University to help you out. As Phil mentioned, there are equipments available, there are office spaces available, and there are academics actually available to help you with the solutions. We have been working with industries in terms of developing Innovate UK and Industrial Base Horizon 2020 Base, that sort of activities. And we do have a good range of facilities as well as really expert academics to help you with low carbon renewable energy systems as well as smart technologies. Feel free to drop emails to me if you want, or to Anna, in case you have any question or you want to have any collaboration. I'm just sending my email. Thank you so much for attending this session. I hope this presentation been useful, and I hope all of us, we do our share in tackling global warming. We all have responsibilities in this matter, and we need to announce, we need to promote actions, and hopefully soon we will see actually the target of net zero is in right pathway, and right scenarios are acting upon, and we will be part of those revolution in terms of protecting our environment and our globe. Thank you so much, and you all have a good afternoon and a good weekend ahead.